Hello and welcome to the Eon podcast. I'm here with a very special guest today, someone that I'm honored to have on the pod because personally, me and the other guys on the podcast have been following him for a while now. He is our white whale. He is an educationist. He is a journalist, an independent filmmaker, and he's sort of the crown prince of Twitter nowadays. We're speaking with Ryan Dawson. Brother Ryan, welcome to the Eon podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, professional black sheep.
I wish that the circumstances under which we met for the first time would be, slightly more pleasant. But unfortunately, the situation in Gaza right now is indescribable.
It's war crimes.
It's war crimes.
They're openly committing war crimes that everyone can see, and no one can do anything about it. Of course, the U.S. could do something about it, but they won't.
There's a common question that people sort of get in their minds when viewing this conflict is who is pulling the strings? Is Israel pulling the strings in Washington, or is Washington pulling the strings in Israel? And that chicken and egg scenario is never clear enough for the audience.
I don't think one dominates the other. They have an overlapping ideological interest. So the Christian Zionists in the West and the Jewish Zionists in Israel agree that God gave them that land, and the U.S. has very strong commercial interests for Lockheed Martin and weapons industries and things to cause conflict, not only there, but in many places. And then the Israelis, too, they have a security state, and they really have the tiger by the tail, or the wolf by the ears, where they've attacked all of their neighbors at some point. They're colonizing the West Bank, and they don't know how to reverse course. And I don't think they're even trying at this point. They're not only bombing Gaza now, they're letting settlers just harass and humiliate people all over the West Bank, and there's killings, and they bombed Jenin, and yeah, they're using Apache helicopters on civilians, including their own people.
Now, there's a lot to unpack there, what you've just said, but we'll start with the last thing first. There has been some footage and some leaked information to show that, in particular, the combat at Kibbutz Be'eri and at the music festival was not directly between the civilians and Hamas, but between Hamas and the IDF. And in between, the civilians sort of become collateral damage. But what you're suggesting is that the Israeli forces indiscriminately attack their own civilians.
Well, at the music festival, what happened was appears to have happened, and this is still open. This is still being investigated. But so far, with the evidence we have, it appears that Hamas once they got rid of the machine gun turrets and communication towers, they spread out on different teams to hit different bases simultaneously. They wiped out the Golani Brigade, which was supposed to be this elite force. They just completely caught them by surprise. A lot of them were probably drunk and asleep because it was a Jewish holiday, and they didn't think anything would happen. And then they were making their way north on the road, 392, I think is the road, to the next base. And the Israeli police, not the IDF, but the police set up a roadblock. And the festival goers couldn't get through the roadblock either. And so the cars just fanned out to the left and to the right. That's why you see these columns of cars getting off the road. And they just get out and start running, just run through the field because the paragliders are coming, the motorcycles are coming, Hamas is here, and they were taking hostages. The police were, and this is on film, and then later the IDF also, were using cars full of civilians where they're shooting at Hamas and ducking and hiding behind the cars that were full of people. And so that was, some people died in the crossfire. Then there were videos of people just being strafed because they didn't know whether or not that was Hamas taking hostages back to Gaza or who was mixed in the crowds. They just killed them all. The Hannibal Doctrine. It all got blamed on Hamas. Then you look at some of the charred remains in these cars. I mean, completely burned. The only side that had a weapon that could do that was the Israelis. Hamas was not running around with flamethrowers or Hellfire missiles. They had some machine guns and some grenades and drones. That's about it. Nothing that could do that. So the Israelis did that to themselves.
One would expect that the impunity with which the Hannibal Directive that you alluded to is practiced by the IDF, and that it would have permeated every member and every sort of echelon of Israeli society by now.
I don't think it was that. I think they just panicked. And then that
Fine.
was the excuse. Because in Ashkelon, they did the same thing. And we have better evidence of this, where they fired into the kibbutzes with tanks. And of course, there's that famous incident where there's two women that survived out of about 20. So there's around 8 Hamas fighters, 20 hostages, and the Israelis just shot into the whole building, got all the Hamas fighters and 18 of the hostages. Just 2 women survived. And they're being lambasted for just saying what happened. Same with some of the hostages who were released. The first thing they said is they translated it to, oh, we went through hell, blah, blah, blah. And they figured that out and go, that's not what I said. One of these women had a niece who spoke English, so she did another press conference with her translating and saying, no, we were treated well and we ate what they ate and we slept on mattresses, da da da. And I understand that hostage taking is wrong, but they didn't start that. And the Israelis took thousands of prisoners, Lincoln style, with no trial, no charges, nothing, which is hostage taking. I mean, except they're not really getting demands. They're just, we're going to take your kids. We're going to take these people because we can. And so Hamas was grabbing Israeli people to try and exchange them for the people that Israel took. I mean, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but it's predictable. If you do that to somebody, that what do you expect them to, how are they supposed to respond?
Also, I
Of
think that
course, they're going to grab you when they can.
yeah. Also, I think that the power dynamic also forces them to behave in ways, the Hamas at least, to behave in ways that wouldn't be so stellar otherwise. But I think that those are the only military tactics that they have access to. That's the worst
Yeah, they don't
nightmare.
have F-15s. They don't have a Navy. They don't have an Air Force. So that's it's the same reason there were kamikaze pilots in World War II. They didn't have anything that could sink the carrier, so they just dove the whole plane into it. That happens under occupation. You saw suicide bombings in Vietnam, and whenever somebody's completely outgunned, the tactics get to utter desperation. But nothing else was working. I mean, they had to try to do the March for Peace, and snipers just shot them up like Swiss cheese. They never would be listened to. And over 200 Palestinians were murdered this year before October 7th, and the 189 in the West Bank alone. And so they're getting killed anyway. And I believe they felt like there isn't a way to resolve this issue without violence, because there's already violence. Under peace means no Israelis getting killed. But during that whole time, Palestinians are being killed and severely abused the whole time. It wasn't until an Israeli died that people paid attention. Once a Jewish person died, then, oh my, here come the cameras. Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn the Israelis? Because they're the ones that murdered 200 people this year. They're the ones that have a wall wrapped around a population with machine guns pointed at their faces. They're the ones that have snipers that can shoot kids through the kneecaps and nothing happens. You won't even write about it. They're the ones that do airstrikes on Syrian commercial airliner and runways just because they can, and that's not considered an act of war. They're the ones that can just get settlers from, Boston or New York and put them in someone else's house, in someone else's living room, and say, I live here now. I'm Jewish. God gave it to me. Get out of here. Or worse, they just take a bulldozer, smash down someone's property because they won't give them permits. They only give permits to the self-proclaimed chosen race of God. And then they build Jewish-only settlements, which by law, only Jews can live in, on top of homes where other people used to live, who were born there and been there for generations. That's the context of That's only some of the context, but that's some of the context of the occupation these people are living with daily. And in Gaza, it's worse than the West Bank. They're on a calorie diet. They're not allowed to have an airport. They're not allowed to have a seaport. They can't have free trade. They're locked in, no one out. And routinely, they'll just turn off the water, turn off the power. They call it mowing the lawn when they go in and blow up a few buildings here and there, blow up the AP building, bomb the university. They bomb the agricultural centers, because Hamas is hiding under the chickens or something. They bomb their water treatment facility because Hamas is hiding in the water tank or something. It's not about human shields or a Hamas guy is there. That is such a canard. They want these people to suffer. They want to force them to leave because the world community will not stomach somebody murdering 2 million people. And so they want to kill enough of them, scare enough of them that they leave on their own accord because life is so unbearable and unlivable. We'll kill your children. We'll kill 10,000, 20,000 of you. It's weird to see if the world will stomach that. Now, some haven't. Bolivia, Colombia, some Latin American countries, and some Middle Eastern countries have cut off not just their ambassador, but just everything. No relation with Israel whatsoever. But that's not enough. Like, as long as they have the United States, they'll be okay, they think. And so, and they're unapologetic about it. Like, well, how can you bomb someone's apartment? I don't even want to argue about which hospital you bombed on what day. They wouldn't be in the hospital if you weren't blowing up their homes. You can't bomb apartment buildings ever. And they're routinely doing it. And they're full of kids and they know it. And there's video of children being pulled out of the rubble, dead or alive or missing limbs or severely burned. It's collective punishment. Now that is terrorism. You're trying to terrorize the population and break its will. And this is what Israel does. And they don't even seem to have remorse. They're like, well, we told you to leave. Well, Hamas told you to leave so many times. They think it's their land, though. It's like God-ordained racism is what they're going with. And so what's shocking is you see a grown adult, like a fully functioning person, get up on TV like Ehud Barak and say, well, we knock first, or we warn them before we blow up the house. As if it's okay to blow up someone's house at all, whether they're in it or not. You can't just blow up people's houses and all their possessions and make them homeless. But they seem to think, well, that's acceptable. And it's a lie. They kill them when they're in it too. But even if they did warn everybody and they emptied Gaza and whatever, and then they blow up all the homes, you're blowing up everybody's homes. You're making 1 million people homeless. And it doesn't even register to them that, oh, that's wrong too.
I think the sort of key, the linchpin in this whole situation is what you said, is that they're somehow God's chosen people, and that God is this overarching real estate agent who's brokered this land deal, and maybe the Arabs didn't give him enough commission.
That's their story, is that guy named Jacob had a wrestling match with some sort of deity or angel or something. And then at the end of the match, although he hurt his thigh and his hip, a deity gave the land to their ethnic group. And that is their legal precedent for why the land is theirs, that a guy named Jacob had a wrestling match with an angel, and then God gave Jews the land. Like, I'm going to give your religious ethnic group this land, and then they changed Jacob's name to Israel, and he had so many kids, and I'm not making this up, they did, that was the 12 tribes of Israel, all from his offspring. And, even though other people were already living there, because the Hebrew don't arrive in the Levant until after the Philistines. The Philistines don't arrive in the Levant until after the Canaanites, and the Canaanites after the, it's a series of things, the Natufians and so on, and Egyptians in the south, I guess. And then the Assyrians and whatever. It's such a ridiculous notion to say God gave us land that other people lived on, and we get to have it exclusively for our brand, our kind of people. The rest of you are a bunch of dumb cattle. We're here to multiply over the earth and subdue it. And Yeah, instead of just giving us land, this cosmic creator of everything said, "Oh yeah, I'll fill it with other people. You're gonna have to destroy all of them and take the land." Yeah, I think they made that up. But anyway, that's the legal reason why they can confiscate private property and bulldoze someone's house is because they think thousands of years ago a deity promised them the dirt that other people are on exclusively to them, by the way. They can't just share the dirt like every other country in the world. They have to have it for them and practice their offerings, which consists of animal sacrifices or whatever. You know, it's pretty ridiculous. But this is absolutely what they believe. God
Now,
wants them
I think
to have that land
the
and build a
untrained.
temple.
I mean, yeah, that is sort of the crux of it. But the way you framed it, unfortunately, that a majority of listeners would assume that this is somehow some sort of an anti-Semitic diatribe. But what seems to be the case is that this is the narrative that has
No,
been pushed
I'll tell you, this
by
is what Zionists
Zionists.
believe. I'll tell you what Jews think. Like, not the like. I'll tell you what anyone that's not insane thinks. If okay, um, like a non-Zionist rabbi would think the chosen by God doesn't mean chosen bloodline or genetics. Then you know what genetics were back then. It means chosen to spread the word of God to everyone around them. That's all. It's not a real estate claim. Israel's not a land, it's a person. They do believe they're descended from Jacob, but they don't believe that they're supposed to destroy all their neighbors and take all this stuff. And then the Christians would add on to that because they're 2/3 of the Bible is the Old Testament. The founding principle is love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay, that's you're not loving thy neighbor as the self if you're gonna take all their thing. That's one of the commandments too in the Torah, not to covet your neighbor's belongings, wife, ox, slave, and so on. So what they're doing is absolutely against both those religions. I imagine Islam as well. And just common sense. Like you can't kill babies. This doesn't need to be written down. No one should have to say, you know what, don't murder, don't steal, don't lie. Duh. But that's they just ignore all that stuff and just go with, a few sentences that say, oh, he gave it to us. We're the chosen. Chosen to what? What he's like, God is Hitler or something? Like, oh, we're superior to all these other lesser thans.
You said that you would assume that would be the case in Islam as well, but I think unfortunately we've seen in the recent past you've seen a brand of Islam similar to Zionism, which is about the exclusive sort of rights to establish some sort of Sharia state, and then you see a similar sort of analogous, reality in Israel where they want to make some sort of Jewish Sharia state where everybody's inferior to them, and it's much worse
Yeah, I
even
suppose
than
they all have factions like that, and Christians had factions like that in the past.
yeah.
And everybody's been like Muslims colonized North Africa, Christians colonized the Americas, and they've all had. But the thing is, we all today admit that was wrong. The only one left are the Zionists doing it in modern times. Like you couldn't just go shoot Native Americans today. You'd definitely go to jail. You can't behave that way. And you get insane. And yet, I mean, there's ISIS or whatever, but what other attack theory in my mind? But we have a state, not just a bunch of crazies or like the Klan or something. We have a government that has a state policy of annexation and the violent and physical removal of people to replace them with their own people.
No, I mean
And that's Israel.
there's 2 billion Muslims. You mentioned ISIS and the Takfiri types. If 2 billion of us were like that, there'd be nobody left on earth.
Yeah, we have major problems.
It's a couple of thousand crazies, and those two, by the way, I would like to clarify for
Those
the audience.
two come from madrasas set up by the CIA that purposely radicalize people.
Yeah, yeah. Throughout the Middle East, as well as specifically in the Syrian conflict recently, they were arming and supporting rebel groups that eventually metastasized and became what we know as ISIS today.
I'd argue it's not in the theology though, and it wasn't like there's nothing in the Bible either. Like for Christians to say, sail to another land and murder everybody. It's like those were commercial interests that took over the faith. Like things get twisted by other pressures, and that happens with a lot of things, even in science too. It'll bend to economic will, yeah, where it's not. Well, this is what empiricism says this, but doesn't matter. Like if they want to have a complete panic over coronavirus and trust the science and all that, it becomes a mouthpiece of the state and commercial pressures. So you have economic and government will take a theology and turn it into a vehicle for what it wants to do, which is steal resources from other people.
Like look at the sugar industry, right? The sugar lobby convinced doctors to say that it was cholesterol that was causing all these problems. To attack meat, to attack
look at the tobacco lobby that said it was healthy for your lungs.
Yeah, I mean, you know, smoke. I smoke Marlboro brand. I said, you know, my doctor supports Marlboro brand. You know, I mean that those kind of ad men from the 50s and 60s, and you can still see these things online, and that doctors used to recommend cigarettes.
You can say, well, maybe they thought it did, and they were wrong. No, they knew.
Yeah, I mean, nobody could believe at any point in human history that if you inhale smoke...
I think when they put asbestos in all the buildings, they didn't know better, but...
yeah, maybe. Yeah,
fireproof.
Maybe the lead in the makeup was a mistake, but cigarettes, they definitely had an idea. You talked about Christian Zionism. You talked about the sort of extremist Zionist political ideology in Israel. Why is it...
That's one half. The other is APEC, yeah.
Why is it specifically so deeply infiltrated into American society and not European society, for example?
Because a parasite always targets the most powerful host. So they're not going to put a lot of effort and energy grabbing Hungary or something. They may be France, maybe the UK, but definitely the United States, because that's the most return for your buck. It's not like Americans are dumber or something. It's just that's the largest economy. That's the largest military. This is where we're going to concentrate our efforts to commandeer the media and control this group. Because when we get this group, we get all the other groups, because America already runs Europe. So if you get America, Europe comes with that package anyway. So why put a lot of time trying to invest in, I don't know, Spain or Germany or something, when if you get the United States, you got all that anyway. And it's just an analogy, but like, yeah, they are pretty parasitic, and the biggest host is definitely the United States. And, you know, it has a system where they have an unregistered foreign agent in APEC that is definitely, it's not a Jewish lobby, it's an Israel lobby, it's in the name even. But right after World War II, it was just political suicide to call them out on it. After the Holocaust, you just couldn't, they just let them do it. And it got to a point where right now you can watch the presidential debates, and all of them, how much they love Israel. And even the last cycle, they're doing the same thing. It doesn't matter if there's a war going on or not. They know where the money is, and they know what they have to say.
Right. APEC has its job. It's lobbying politicians. And this time, unfortunately, you saw everyone like in lockstep. Every single presidential candidate. I mean, RFK practically tanked his campaign, right, as an anti-establishment guy.
Yeah, he had a lot of support until that. Same with Tulsi Gabbard. People loved her.
I was shocked by Tulsi Gabbard. I was absolutely shocked by Tulsi Gabbard. I thought she was a reasonable human being. And then you see... No, but where is the wrong
She was pretty good on Syria. And that's what I think makes people more mad is... RFK was pretty good on the virus nonsense. And, you know, he doesn't want to keep the war in Ukraine, and he was doing fine. And then Rabbi Shmuley gets hold of him or whatever, and it's so disappointing with him, because they killed, well, this is YouTube, so never mind. I'll say something about his relatives. Let's just leave it there. But, yeah, that's what makes it worse.
One would expect more integrity from him, considering his family.
Yeah, because of what happened to his uncle and his dad by somebody. By lone wolves.
Yeah, there were, you know, there's a really funny joke.
Is it the Bill Hicks joke?
I think it might be the Bill Hicks joke.
You
That
ever see the window at the book depository?
no, I've never heard that one. You go ahead,
Because
please.
if you ever go to Daily Plaza
Right.
now, it's like a museum. They got the whole thing. They got the window with the shooter, right? It's so accurate because Oswald isn't there.
No,
Love that
I have
joke.
another one that a guy dies and goes to heaven. He's at the pearly gates and he's led in and he meets God and he asks him. God says, "My son, my child, you can ask me anything you want, and it'll be granted to you." He says, "Who killed JFK?" He says it was Lee Harvey Oswald with his rifle, and he acted alone on that day on the grassy knoll. And the guy says, "This goes farther up than God." Uh,
Yeah. He also put him on the grassy knoll.
so I
I
mean,
got one.
no, sure.
How many Israelis does it take to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
Zero. It's already in the house they stole.
That one's too real right
How
now.
many Palestinians does it take to screw in a light bulb?
One.
We don't know. The light bulb always outlasts the house.
That's a bit too dark.
Too soon.
Right
Yeah.
now.
But it's like it drives home a point that
Yeah.
seriously a light bulb might outlast the home because Israelis blow them up so periodically.
That's yeah. This genuinely.
I'm at my limit, man, of seeing kids being pulled out of the rubble, and
Yeah, I mean, after
I can't
Iraq,
even. This month, I've seen some of the worst stuff I've seen in my life,
I would agree with you because after Iraq, you maybe
and I
Iraq.
saw Nancy Pelosi.
I mean, Iraq was the sort of the first televised war, right? But like this stuff was, the because you see these kids, Motaz and Plastia and all these kids on the ground, these press kids, they're like 21, 22 on their Instagram and they're uploading just constantly. I think the internet. I mean, it's good in the sense that people should be harassed with these images and they should be forced to look at what the American foreign policy is doing and the silence of Europe is doing. But at the same time, it's so desensitizing, I think, for human beings to watch this. No human being should see these things, let alone do them.
Well,
Let alone do
I
them.
think for you and me, like people with empathy, it's unnecessary. All I have to do is hear about it. I'm ready, And I saw the starvation in Yemen and Iraq and all that too. The difference is this isn't even being condemned. Like they're doing it and they're trying to justify it. And I've seen all the Holocaust footage and all that, but I'm like, yeah, but at least that's condemned. At least we admit it was wrong. They won't even admit it's wrong. That's what's so bothersome. And we don't know when it's going to end. And it's just, yeah, I get your point, and I think it depends on the person, but I do think there are people who, if I said 64 people were blown up on a bus in Sudan today, they're like, oh, wow. Yeah, it doesn't hurt, they don't feel it. If I show the SAF or RSF, just and a boom and the limbs going everywhere and they see a bus full of people get blown up and then the shock comes and, oh my God, where is that again? We need to stop that. Well, I told you that, but people who lack imagination lack empathy, because I think, in my opinion, imagination is a requirement to be able to have empathy and sympathy. And so because they can't visualize it, because they can't emotionally digest something just from having it described to them, they have to see it. And that's why I think all these videos are important. But I am not one of those people. I'm going to remember these videos for the next 30 years. They'll be in my head somewhere. So I don't want to see anymore. I'm already sold. Like, I want to end this whole thing and I don't need to see another one. But there are people who have been on the fence on all these conflicts, and they finally saw the first time some child like shaking because their whole family's been wiped out. They don't know what they're going to do. They have no parents, no brother, no sister or anything. They're the only one left. They're just in a hospital crying. Other people are bleeding, coming in with burn marks. No one's even, some of these kids were just like, they get lost in the shuffle. Doctors are attending to other people, and there's just some kid just like completely dead inside the eyes. And you got to see that. I can just know about it, but I know people that I had to show them those videos, and then finally, they say, okay, how do we stop Israel? Why are we giving them money? I can't believe they do this. They can't believe they do it until they see it. Now, that's not you. That's not me. That's not a lot of people. But there's a huge swath of people that can't. I don't know why they don't. It just I don't know that maybe they grew up. This is my hypothesis, but so much of watching TV and movies and phones and stuff that they've never had to picture thing. It's just there, just be, that if you read a book or something, all that's in your mind, right? You guys just seeing letters and okay. And so you have to exercise that ability, that skill. And imagination is a skill. It's not just something you have. It's just like muscles or whatever. You got to use it or you lose it. But they just turn on a TV, watch a thing, turn on a Netflix, watch a thing. And so when you just tell them something, there's no, they don't get it. They're not moved. And, but a very sensitive person, usually it's someone who reads a lot. I'll tell them something like I just said, and they'll be like, stop. They almost want to cry from me describing it to them because they picture it and they feel it.
Well,
It also has to do with your life experience. So, because this is an interesting test. If you showed someone like run up and like kick a puppy across the room and just like wilts, and you like, man, all the animals, because people have dogs and they can imagine something bad, a car hit their dog or somebody who's mean, or it's within their like range of experience, but they can't imagine a baby with the ribs poking out, slowly starving in front of them, like what happened in Yemen. Their eyes sunken in, they're desperate, they just want milk and there's none. Why aren't you taking care of me? Why doesn't someone help me? And they just watch and have a parent just painfully watching their child slowly die. And that's so, out of their universe. But, slap a puppy and they're ready to kill somebody. But knowing that all these people are starving, it's preventable starvation too. It's not like we have food shortages. Like we could totally stop this, but we don't. But they would be out in the streets if it was a cat or something. And it's just happens to be whatever's within their emotional range, what's relatable to them. They understand that. They don't the other stuff, the horrors that are happening to people is so far removed from their world. These are people that get upset when the ice machine's on a different floor when they stay in a hotel. They don't know what it's like to just the roof caves in, and the stuff that's happening in Gaza is they've never even seen shit like that in a movie.
Right.
And yet this is every day for the last month for the people living there.
Yeah, I mean, this month in particular, sure, but I mean, it's been 75 years of just constant harassment.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. It's 75 years, and then we had it in 09 and 2014 and 2021 and 2006 is mowing them on, dialogue, whatever they call it. And it's not just Palestine either. I mean, there's a civil war in Sudan right now. Like 700 people got wiped this week around that. And there was still an attack by ISIS, 21 people killed. That was this week. And they did it at the same time that the Israelis were striking Syria. It's almost like they coordinated. And then obviously there's the war in Ukraine, which is probably 500,000 people dead from that war. Totally pointless, totally preventable. They never should have attacked the Donbass. NATO should not have been threatening Russia. The whole thing could have been resolved if we had functioning adults instead of Victoria Nuland and Sullivan and Anthony Blinken, who's not a serious person.
Victoria Nuland, she called Islamabad the capital of Pakistan the other day. They were organized one of the no, I'm not kidding.
Hey, better than Kamala Harris. You hear her explanation. Russia is a big country. Ukraine is a smaller country. Yeah. Thank you for that.
We did it, Joe.
She said Islamabad. All right, go ahead.
Victoria Nuland called Islamabad because they were organizing a big protest. One of the right-wing parties was organizing a big protest, and a march for peace. and they had the guy arrested. He was the chairman of one of the biggest parties in Pakistan, and they had him arrested. And in his post-arrest interview, he said Victoria Newland literally called. No,
Where did she say this?
This will not be reported in any international media. I'll link you the story.
Oh, sorry, I had a Hezbollah update. My phone just gets lit up with this stuff.
Can imagine, but it was nowhere in the international press, obviously, because Pakistan is a nothing country to the American media. But she called just to warn these guys that this better not be a big deal. They're putting a lot of international pressure everywhere. You see unelected people like...
You can tell it's not important when Kamala Harris is assigned to deal with it, or Victoria Nuland.
Yeah.
Sorry, either one. You definitely don't matter if it's Kamala Harris.
And we are an officially nuclear armed state, by the way. We have over 200.
Yeah, are you like the 6th biggest on Earth?
Yeah, we have 200. Yeah, we have 200 nuclear warheads, and nobody
it's like
cares.
India, China, the U.S.,
France,
Brazil. No, Brazil's bigger than France.
Yeah, definitely. I thought we were counting.
Yeah, then it's like, and then it might be Pakistan.
It's 5th or 6th because Indonesia's up there as well. I thought we were counting nukes. So nukes is America, France.
That's Russia's number 1.
Russia, China, India, and Pakistan. But obviously, Israel doesn't have nukes.
Yeah, so they threaten to use nukes that they don't have.
Yeah, the Samson
option stole, is a threat. Know how they got their nukes, right?
Yeah.
They stole highly enriched uranium from the United States out of Apollo, Pennsylvania.
No, but this is the thing that...
And Benjamin Netanyahu was part of that. He helped smuggle Kryton triggers through Heli Trading Company with Arnan Milchan. He was part of the nuclear
If you want to watch this, you've done a really good documentary about this.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, there's some great books I have on my back shelf. That blue one by my thumb right there, that's Roger Monson, and there's Grant F. Smith wrote Divert. It's another great book.
Divert
yeah, I have
by
a
Roger Monson.
Film called NUMEC. It's an acronym, like Nuclear Material and Equipment Corporation, NUMEC. And that's on Rumble, and it's somewhere on Twitter buried in my feed.
We'll find it and we'll put it here, inshallah.
Oh, it's nice. MashaAllah.
All right. So, as third-party observers, it's very insane for us to think that the U.S. would allow this kind of, like, USS Liberty, the stealing of nuclear material, selling American weapons and drone technology to the Chinese.
Oh, man, their whole fighter jet program is from the U.S., from Israel. Exactly.
This stuff, I mean,
they blew up an embassy. They blew up hotels. They sank the SS Patria, which was a British ship. They have bombed targets in Iraq, Egypt, Yemen, to attacking their own Jewish diaspora to force them to Israel. And there's all the abuses they've done. Deir Yassin massacre in Palestine, the Jenin massacre in Palestine, and all these things. And yeah, but they, what do they give the Jonathan Pollard stole our first strike plan on the Soviet Union and sold it to him.
No, but I don't get, like, where's the retribution from the Americans, from the CIA, from the FBI,
give them billions of dollars. I mean, there's a really big thing they did in 1963, November 22nd. They had a hand in that thing. And yeah, it's yeah. How do they get away with the most egregious crimes? Even both Iraq wars and the war, proxy war in Syria, the U.S. was dragged into that by Israel. A bunch of neocons, we'll say, wrote all this garbage. They had an office within an office called the Office of Special Plans, and they just fabricated or cherry-picked information that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, that he gave anthrax to 9/11 hijackers. None of this is true, by the way. They had mobile weapons labs, and he had chemicals on weapons under his palaces, and all false. We end up in the second war in a row with Iraq, murdered almost 1 million people, over 1 million after you include all the deaths that happened during the occupation, way over to mark. Thousands of Americans, trillions of dollars for nothing. Because Israel needed to get rid of Saddam. Saddam aided Palestinians. They were afraid of the Ba'athist movement. And, he'd fired scuds at Saudi Arabia and Israel. He knew well who wanted to get rid of him. And the first Gulf War, that Iraq was deeply in debt. Kuwait was angle drilling. They said that's our oil field. They needed that to get out of the debt from the long war they had with Iran. And yeah, they orchestrated this too with another babies mythology. They're throwing babies out of the incubators on the cold floor. And George Bush and Tom Lantis and all they went in there. But why was there Iran-Iraq war? I mean, you got to go back to Oded Yanan, and that this is all Israeli-centric interest to destroy both countries so they can have regional hegemony.
I would add to that analysis Saudi Arabia. So I, as a Muslim, have done the
Oh,
Hajj.
well, yes. Well,
So I've done the Hajj.
see,
I'm done
this
with
is
the
the thing you
pilgrimage.
said we can't talk about on YouTube. So I was like skipping it. But yes, that and another country had a role in 7-Eleven. Can we say it like that?
24/7, 7-Eleven. Sure.
Sure.
And
7-Eleven, we know that Saudi Arabia gave that franchise financial support. We know that Israel was helping the 7-Eleven trucks with their deliveries.
sure.
And how can I put it?
Yeah. They had a
And
good
the,
view.
Slurp,
They had a
the
good
Slurpee
view.
machine blew up because there was a team caught, led by a man from Jerusalem, that were sabotaging the fire prevention systems in the 7-Eleven.
And they had a good viewing deck for the Slurpee machine, I feel.
Oh, yeah, they had a nice dance off.
They had a nice dance off.
Yes.
Right, I will leave it at that. But I've completed my religious obligation to go to the Hajj. The Hajj is the big pilgrimage, which happens to be in Saudi Arabia. So I'm done. I can talk about Saudi Arabia now. I don't have to go anymore. Yeah, but
Well, that place is Bush Sr. brought them in this with a safari club back in '76 to break the OPEC cartel as a reaction to the Yom Kippur War in '73. The Arab states and Persians used oil as a weapon to say, okay, we'll withhold the oil. We don't have to beat your economy. We don't have to beat your military. All we have to do is take this vital resource away. And there were gas lines. And he said, well, who has the largest reserves? Saudi Arabia, followed by Iraq. All right, well, they'll bring them into the pre-existing nexus of Israel and the United States. They got the Saudi kingdom on board. Pretty easy to do. It's one family you have to bribe. Bechtel and the companies moved in. They built the sewage system in Saudi Arabia. They modernized it, but it all coming at a cost of subservience. And the Saudis, along with foreign country A, did a number of things, what we can call jointly conducted intelligence operations, including the formation of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, Mujahideen, Osama bin Laden and the diaspora, a lot of them from Saudi Arabia, paid mercenaries to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. And we created a Frankenstein because it's Al-Qaeda again that comes back on a September day, a Tuesday in 2001. And yeah, Saudi Arabia's fingerprints are all over that, but I'm not even allowed to talk about it on YouTube, but I do have a movie about it on my website.
yeah,
It's 5 hours long.
I think with that movie we're gonna have to do broken up screenings of it because it's too long.
Yeah, that movie's there's some nice clips from it I did on a show called Fresh and Fit.
I'm aware of the show.
It's on Rumble. It starts on YouTube, but you really have to go to Rumble to see the stuff that gets censored. And this is the thing. This is also part of the control. So you have your Christian Zionists, you have AIPAC, and the third thing is the censorship. If you criticize Israel, you're a dirty anti-Semite, you love Hitler, and they will just ruin your reputation, go after your businesses. If you look at the people who do speak out, they're almost all self-employed. Because if you're not, the first thing they do is go after your employer and try to get you fired. Dirty tactics.
Like in the protesters in New York, you see people doxing them, taking their pictures, and trying to get them fired. Yeah.
Trying to get them fired. Exactly. And that's why, like, the university system, they're scared. They know better. They won't. The students, whatever, but professors, until they get tenure, they're not going to say anything because they will get fired.
And what are the mechanisms? Who is organizing this on ground? Is it the ADL? Is it APEC? Is it smaller groups? Who are these people?
It's okay. A lot of it is the ADL and the SPLC, the ones you know. But there's a long list of what we call Israeli affiliate groups. And there's a great book by Grant F. Smith called Big Israel that goes over the whole. It's like organized crime, but it's not like organized crime. It's organized crime. And they have all the Friends of Israel groups and Israeli affiliate groups that, like Camera, for example, and of course the SPLC and the ADL. But there's a lot more. And they go the Canary Mission and Stop Hate, something in Canada, Stop Hate, pick a country name. They have Twitter handles and stuff. And it's their job to get people canceled, fired, removed from payment processors, lose their employment, throw them out of university, because they know that if you accuse somebody of racism, anti-Semitism, same thing, then their life is over. And because it's one of the things that it's like accusing somebody of rape. You're never fully exonerated. Just the accusation of rape will destroy your life, even if you didn't do it. Because it's like, oh, did you? And they know it's like, oh, I didn't have to prove anything. Just have to say this person thinks a certain way. Because at least with rape, there needs to be someone who got raped. It's much easier to lie about racism, because you can calling someone anti-Semitic or some other kind of racism doesn't require a victim. Just this is what I think they think. They're a Jew hater, and that person will get canceled. I've been canceled. I don't even know who my accusers are. There's these anonymous hordes. And they say things like this: oh, "You're a Holocaust denier. You hate Jews. You wanna wipe us off the map or whatever." It's like, wow, why? Because I won't let you wipe Palestinians off the map. Has nothing to do with Judaism. Has nothing to do with Jews. This is a common right and wrong. You can't murder your neighbors. I mean, if I criticize North Korea, no one's going to say I hate Koreans or I hate Asians. They're just to say I don't like communists. And I don't like Zionists. I don't like any kind of racial supremacists, whether it's white supremacists, Jewish supremacists, black supremacists, doesn't matter. It's a stupid ideology. But the only one I see active right now are the Zionists. People, I mean, there's racism, but not to the point where they murder the other race. There's people like maybe won't hire somebody or they think less of somebody, and that's bad, but it's nothing like this, man. You've got a government that is making decisions based on this concept of being holier than thou and being above other people and having God as the real estate agent. It's really wild.
I mean, the infiltration is deep. It permeates every single segment of American society: academia, media, politicians, the deep state, you name it.
There's Holocaust museums for what happened to a foreign people by a foreign government in a foreign land. Where's the Native American museums that happened to people from our own government on this land? Few and far between, and even more so, Holocaust museums are global. Where's the Native American Museum in Germany? Because they didn't do it. We didn't do it either. Why do we have all these things? I think museums and things are good no matter what it is. To remember atrocities and not repeat them. You could have them all together, even like this happened to the Jews here, Native Americans here, Armenians here, to say like, look at everybody, even the Irish. Somebody at some point has been kicked around by somebody else, all the way back to the Mongolian hordes. I don't know how far you want to go. It's a dark side of humanity when we wipe each other out like that. But there seems to be an overemphasis on Jewish suffering as if it's unique. And the same with slavery. They pretend like black slavery in the southern half of the United States was some unique event, when slavery was global. It was every race, practically every nation, and it was also practiced throughout the entire United States, not just the South. But it also happened to Chinese and natives and others as well, and whites. So, but they they act like slavery started in America or something. It's like how they get there.
You think
It is.
there's two questions that come from that. Well, number one, coming back to the earlier statement of the infiltration is deep, but how does a Ron Paul survive this, and are we going to see another one? Because his son is not up to the task. Uh, and secondly,
Well,
do you think that this
Rand's pretty
guilt?
good for a senator. He's not his dad. Ron
Yeah.
Paul is the best. Rand Paul is better than any other senator. And Thomas Massey is probably our best representative. And I think they're both from Kentucky. So props to that state. But Ron Paul is a rare occurrence. But I think his ideas have permeated to a lot of people. I had Scott Horton on my show this morning, and he had a picture of Ron Paul behind him. He's had a big impact on people our age. Scott's a couple years older than me, I think. And I'm a huge Ron Paul fan. And I try and take those principles in the best as I can. And, it's January McAdams. And there'll be others like Ron Paul is getting up there in age. But he affected a lot of people. So it doesn't have to be his son or grandson. It could be anyone that has the ideas of liberty. Ron
Secondly,
Paul himself was influenced by the Jeffersonians and John Locke and others before him. So Hayek
secondly,
and
I mean, this weaponized guilt for the Holocaust, let's say specifically, because in this case, that's what we're discussing. This weaponized guilt that's sort of held over everyone's head is hanging above you, and it justifies American tax dollars being spent. American presidential candidates are, they're pledging money to Israel that they don't have. America is in massive amounts of debt. America is printing money like never before. America is financing a losing
and
war.
look at all the millions America killed after World War II in Vietnam,
Right.
in the northern half of Korea, in Iraq.
Why are people so motivated in the population, in civil society, to let their kids go and fight in some bum war in the Middle East? Why are people willing to spend their tax dollars? What is so motivating about Israel and the Israel lobby that you see people coming out in droves to support these politicians and not demand a politician perhaps that represents their will?
The people deciding to create the war aren't going to fight it. And the people whose children are going to fight were lied to. They were told there's weapons of mass destruction, that they're going to hit the UK with VX gas or whatever, that they had a role in 9/11. They said that Saddam Hussein, senior Iraqi officials gave anthrax to Mohammed Atta in Prague. No, he didn't. It never happened. But they thought that Iraq had something to do with 9/11, so they wanted revenge. So they do it because they get lied to. Why do they keep reelecting these people? Well, as we were discussing earlier, they may start off one way, like Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr., and then 180, once they get Epstein or that APAC money. And so they don't have a choice. They're always, voting is about damage control. They're always voting for the one they hate the least. They never get to vote for someone they actually want. And that has to do with the primary system. It's the country of over 300 million people. And so it's very hard to get on the stage, to be heard, to even be considered to be a candidate without getting some initial capital from some big lobby or business interests. No one will know who you are. And up until Elon bought Twitter, there was no way for someone like me, for example, if I wanted to run for Congress, it would have been possible because I'm not on YouTube. I'm not allowed on any of these things. So without social media, you can't really be heard. That would have been the equalizer. You could just make a commercial and put it up for free, and a lot of people could see it. Millions of people could see it even. You don't have to just buy TV time like the past. But for the majority of, from Kennedy onward, it's been the television presidents. So if you don't have enough money to get on TV and radio and be heard and seen, then you won't even be an option in the primary. And so you can never be president. You can never be in Congress. You have to have some way of being known. And a lot of people are going to risk a substantial amount of their own wealth to run for Congress. And so it ends up becoming a contest of people who are sponsored. And so you end up with corporate interests because those are the only viable candidates. Only when, like, Ron Paul got in because the congressman he replaced died while he was in office. So there was no incumbent. And they just thought, here's a doctor, a veteran, he had all the check boxes, and he got in there. But that was rare. Over 90% of the time, the incumbent just keeps their chair. Once they're in, they're in. So they have the name recognition and they have the ability to be known. And so that's part of the problem, is the corporate influence over who the public gets to pick between, right? It doesn't matter who you vote for because the people you get to choose from already went through a pre-selection process. You wouldn't even know who they were unless they were a corporate shill, or they're independently wealthy like Ross Perot or maybe Elon Musk or someone who has so much money that it wouldn't matter. And that's happened too. And this is what's odd. It's when celebrities like Jesse Ventura or Arnold Schwarzenegger or something, they are known for something else. Or Glenn Jacobs, he was Kane in the WWE. Glenn Jacobs has been a great mayor. But he did win because he was Kane. Let's not, it's not because he had Austrian economics and da-da-da. It's because that guy's 7 feet tall and he's awesome and he chokeslammed people through a table. And I know him and I don't know this other person. The fame helped him win. And so now and then you'll get somebody, even Reagan was an actor, like there is a way if you get famous doing something else and then go into politics, that might be a way to have the money without the corporate puppet strings. But it shouldn't be like that. It should be, if you have the good ideas and understand this stuff, you have a good mind for geopolitics, you understand foreign policy, history, different culture, like that's the person we need. But we end up with like Nikki Haley or,
or
some of these people with Lindsey Graham or what?
Just
awful.
Just constructs of human beings, honestly. They're not even real people. They're just talking points.
It is amazing. You think we have 300 million people and that is the best. Where's the engineers? Where's the scientists? Where's the professionals? Where's the professional? See, that's what happened with Trump. You had a billionaire who decided, I want to be president. And he has so much money that he doesn't have to listen to any of them. And so they hated him. The entire mass media was anti-Trump before he was even president. And they just never stopped.
What happened?
They lied about him. They called him a racist. They had all this stuff because
Orange Man bad.
They didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't own him.
But what happened there? He was supposed to break the mold. He was supposed to drain the swamp. He was supposed to be the anti-war, anti-establishment president.
Well,
but now you see him, and he
was kind of anti-war. I mean, he didn't start any new wars.
When he
made the plan to get out of Afghanistan. He told them to get out of Syria, and they disobeyed. He did cut corporate tax rates. He did get out of the Paris Accord. He did kill TPP. He killed NAFTA. He renegotiated a lot of trade policies, especially with China, to make them more even. He did curb immigration, even though he didn't get all of his wall built. He got some of it, but just the threat of it got rid of a lot of that too. So he kept a lot of his promises. He did, at the very end, he got transparency on healthcare. So they have to at least tell you what the price is, ahead of time. But a lot of the other stuff he wanted to do, he just couldn't do. Like Congress just was like, no. And, he really had no one to work with, and he kept picking the worst people. He thought, okay, I'll grab the military people. So he had, Mad Dog Mattis, and then he had Rex Tillerson, and then he had Mark Esper, who was fired on the 9th of November.
Mattis was honey trapped, right?
They may have had dirt on one of his kids. They may have had dirt on Trump. Who knows? But they're like, why do you side with Israel? I'm like, because he always sides with money. But that sometimes the amoral business model goes against what Zog wants. So when it comes to Palestine and Israel, Israel has a big lobby. Palestine doesn't have a lobby, so he sided with Israel. When it came to Saudi Arabia and Yemen, he sided with Saudi Arabia because Yemen's small, Saudi Arabia is rich. However, when it came to Syria or ISIS, he sided with Syria because they're the bigger player. And when it came to Russia and Ukraine, he sided with Russia because they're the bigger player. So there were times where just siding with whoever has more money happened to be the right thing. So they didn't like that. They want 10 out of 10, not 5 out of 10.
He wasn't principled in his anti-war stance, but at least it was something. I mean, if we're going
it wasn't like war's immoral. It's war's bad for business. And his whole thing is he's a businessman. He has a cold, amoral outlook on like, well, how does that make us money? What are we doing? Why are we giving money to these takfiri groups in Syria? Just let Syria and Russia handle it. We shouldn't even be in there. That was his attitude. He's like, this is a waste of money. I don't care why you pulled out. I mean, it ought to be because for moral reasons too, but man, just take the W, just get out. Just take it as a win. And he was the first guy in decades not to start a new war and to de-escalate the ones that he inherited.
This much that we in the third world as well, here in Pakistan as well, we also recognize that Donald Trump didn't, he wasn't like Obama or Bush. I mean, I remember that, I don't remember the exact incident.
Obama destroyed Libya and Syria. And
the Bush smart war doctrine, it was very smart. We know the amount of drone strikes that happened in Pakistan and our neighbor Afghanistan. We're aware of them.
Obama bombed Pakistan his third day in office.
Yes, he did. And Obama
had a party, all that, first thing on his desk.
Technically, he
bombed Pakistan.
He drone striked the first American citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki.
He made a kill list, and he killed Anwar al-Awlaki, and he killed a cousin of his who was also American.
He killed his son in a follow-up, 16-year-old son in a follow-up strike.
And I think Trump killed one of his daughters.
Anwar al-Awlaki's daughters.
I just thought the one. This is what's bad is there's so many drone strikes where they'll hit weddings, funerals, whatever. Think of that sickness. This is Israeli type stuff. Oh, there's a whole bunch of cars because there's a funeral, let's say. Boom. And they would do the Dresden thing where they would send in a drone, shoot up a wedding or whatever, and then time it. Wait till the fire trucks come to put out the fires and then go and blow them up too to hit the rescue workers. And it was a new toy. It's like, oh, look, we can bomb stuff with no risk of our pilot or anybody. Nothing will happen. It's just a toy. It's a robot, a killing machine. And yeah, they've increased. Trump had a lot of drone strikes. Obama had a lot of drone strikes. Bush, it wasn't really available to him as much. But as the drones improved and we got more of them, we used them more. It was simple math. It just went up as it was able to go up. And I really don't like that. Like having skin in the game was one of the reasons you don't do stuff. Like it's like, well, we could die too. When the gap's enough where they have enough advanced drones, like if they had drones, if they had those little robots shaped like dogs that could just run down into the tunnels, they would do that and go blow up Hamas with drones. They don't have them yet.
No, but you see that the reason why they flattened Gaza before they did all this aerial bombing is because they're not willing to risk their troops. They're not willing to because they're in their minds, in the calculus that they have, I think they've written off the hostages, that we're going to take them out and the Hamas fighters and the civilians as much as we can so that when we actually do an actual ground invasion, because wherever they're doing a ground invasion, they're having it handed to them by Hamas fighters. I mean, everyone's seeing the footage. Abu Ubaidah, who's
they're lying about that too.
100%.
They're got all these evac helicopters taking out their wounded and dead. So they're getting shot up. They're losing tanks too. There's 105 Yassins are lighting them up. They're blowing up Gaza because they can, and it's ethnic cleansing. They want to force them to move. Over and over again, they're like, let's force them to Egypt because there's no right of return, and they plan on annexing more territory. What's wild is they assume, and possibly rightly so, that they can just murder all these innocent people and that it's okay. Nothing will happen in the future. There won't be any sanctions on Israel. There won't be any consequence. And they might be right. No one will do anything.
I mean, you remember that Bush
And
said
I really think there's
yeah.
not a solution until you fix America. No, like America's the bully. Like, okay, let's say America sat this one out. 100% all their neighbors are getting up on Israel. 100%.
Yeah.
The threat is the United States.
No, but if two things. Number one, I remember when Bush, I mean, it was before the Iraq War. He said that he was following the prophecy of Elijah or some insane biblical nonsense.
Oh, he's on a new crusade. He said.
Yeah, no, and he also there was a quote by the French premier where he said something to the effect of, "Oh, I have to fight Gog or Magog or something." Some insane Bible prophecy that he was following. And the other thing is, I mean, when you have this kind of insane Christian Zionism in America, and on the other hand, you said that.
Can you imagine thinking you're the hand of God's will and like you're going to implement the Bible? Like you.
It's insane. It's genuinely insane.
Yeah.
It's genuinely. On the other hand, you said something very fascinating that if the moment of America sits this one out, that their neighbors would attack and then they would deal with Israel. Judea was a Roman colony, right? And then eventually the Romans got bored of it, and then you had Hadrian coming in, and when they created enough trouble, when Judea was enough of a problem, Hadrian came in and he slaughtered the people, and I'm not going to say America is going to do that, but when does Rome, in this scenario, which is America, get bored of this only democracy in the Middle East that it's been propping up for at least 60, 50 years, if not, the whole 75? When do they get bored?
I think Ehud Barat was right when he worried. It said that no Jewish empire exists more than 80 years, and they're on year 75. The clock is running out. Like the American people, there's protests in every major American city. They're sick of it. And it really has been Telegram and Twitter being able to show people, like I said, people lack imagination, be able to see the atrocities, to finally shake them off the couch and go, okay, this needs to be a frontline issue, like their border or the healthcare you can't afford or whatever. Like, stop sending billions of dollars to Israel and Ukraine. It's got to end. And I think this cycle, this is a really good chance that they've stepped in it and bitten off more than they can chew, because the public is just adamantly against. They're booing these candidates off the stages. You can't stand every time they're like, yay, Israel, and Apex there. But people at home are going, what the heck? I don't want to spend money on this. That's your problem. Let them deal with it.
Yeah, because the presumption here is that I think that most people on earth, a majority of human beings, are just baseline, they're moral people, but they're mostly tricked and manipulated into signing off on these goofy projects like Iraq or Afghanistan or is the Israel project right now. And you're right, the internet and specifically Telegram and Twitter, and then especially people like you've done a good job where you've gathered enough of an audience and showing them the barbarity of what's going on in Gaza right now. It just sort of jolts people,
But I've been cyclically banned until this year, right? It's like whack-a-mole. As soon as I get my head above the surface, they erase whatever I did. Now, I feel like way more motivated because the effort I'm going to put in will have returns. That, once I reach this number, I'm not going to get erased. I can keep going and getting the information out. And it's not just me. There's so many people now. Look at Twitter. I mean, every Zionist is getting ratioed. No one believes their crap about 40 beheaded babies and stuff. And that definitely would have worked in the past.
I don't know. I'm kind of convinced. I mean, I feel like Ben Shapiro makes a lot of sense.
Benacide.
Yeah, Benacide Shabibo makes a lot of sense sometimes.
It's so funny the stuff he's saying. If you just flip the words, they'd be true.
What is this guy, like 90 pounds? I mean, he's like this lightweight. He needs to go fight the war. I mean,
he's definitely got little dog syndrome, and
yeah.
He's just one of these dorks that, he had his little yarmulke and his violin and just, he hates everyone.
He seems like a debate nerd. Yeah, definitely. One of those debate nerd,
He doesn't debate adults, though. I mean, he's an Adderall addict. That's why he's talking like, when someone's going a million miles a minute, they're popping Adderall.
What about one of
Can
his?
you imagine trying to take a drug to win a debate? Like the purpose of the debate is supposed to be to figure out what's true, not to like already decide what's true and try to win. You're supposed to here's my points, here's your counterpoints and stuff, and you go back and forth to figure out what's true, not who's right, but what is right, what's true here.
I
And
mean,
it's, often the case where like, I think I already know what you're going to say because I've heard this so much, but I don't think you've heard what I'm about to say. But man, you don't need Adderall for that. You need Adderall to just out talk somebody. But that's not,
that's essentially,
that's
by
not
the way,
truthful. That's just like,
most Zionist propaganda, by the way, that I've observed is just out talking people. Just keep throwing talking points at them until they get bored of you.
but do you condemn hummus?
Yeah, I mean, I actually like
I
Hamas.
say Israel has the right to condemn itself.
Yeah.
You can't be on defense while you're occupying people. You can't claim I'm striving for peace while I'm simultaneously colonizing my neighbors.
No, I mean,
Unless you spell peace with an I and you're just trying to take a piece of that, a piece of this.
Israel has been successful in this. You have to admit that they're one of the only countries, one of the only occupying imperial forces that has pulled off being an occupier and a victim at the same time. That nobody's
Because
done
they
this.
controlled the press. Like once they lost that monopoly,
No,
which they have on Twitter, it's all fallen apart really fast.
this Elon Musk has
Even
been.
CNN, like Anderson Cooper had a nurse on
I saw
who
that.
talked about, yeah. And you know what the most shocking thing was? This is what's shocking about the shocking. I was not shocked by what she said, that she saw bodies with burns all over them. They didn't have enough water, and you have thousands of people sharing 4 toilets and all that. It's all information I knew. The most shocking thing about that whole segment was, wow, this is actually on CNN. That was more of a surprise than the horror she described, because I'm so used to mass media just never, ever telling you the truth, especially on Israel and Palestine. It's the first time I've ever seen sympathy for Palestine on TV.
And
They've been pressured to go that way because they're looking at Twitter and they're realizing if we don't start telling the truth, they're not even going to turn the TV on. They're going to go straight to Twitter for the news.
I mean, I heard this somewhere. I thought it was really funny that CNN and Fox are on in old age homes and at airports, and that's the only place people are watching these things. And I think you see Pierce Morgan.
Hey, you have more viewers than CNN Plus.
Yeah, I think Pierce Morgan
gone.
is desperate. I mean, you saw with him bringing on all these pro-Palestine people is because he understands the numbers game. And if you see his YouTube figures that he's done, at the same
He's
time,
like, I'm not saying it. He said it. He's doing the Norm Macdonald, not me. This guy over here.
I mean, let's not sully the Norm Macdonald of the guy. The classic.
It makes me think Pierce probably knows. Yeah, he knows.
It seems he's sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinian people, and he doesn't have the guts to say what he wants to say because his Zionist masters.
He'd get fired. He'd get the Tucker treatment.
In a heartbeat, brother. I mean, look at Peterson.
But you know what? That's the other thing about X or Twitter. Tucker or whoever can go over there and get their own channel and still be seen by millions. And if Pierce came over to X, if he did get fired or something, he'd be able to really take the gloves off. And that's part of why they're not being fired, is because they know, oh, there's this alternative place to go. We better keep them and have some semblance of control, because once they go over there, we don't know what they're going to say.
I mean, with all the qualms that one would have with Elon Musk, the artist formerly known as X or Twitter has been...
The artist formerly known as Twitter, yeah.
Yeah, has been, regardless of all the qualms that one might have with Elon Musk, X has been a breath of fresh air, honestly. Like, with guys like you coming back.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he's Justin Raimondo or anything. I'm just saying way better than the last guy. The same thing with Trump. Like, I know he killed Soleimani. I know all the stupid stuff he did. Yeah. I'm just comparing him to other, like Obama or Bush. He's way better than that. So
yeah, unfortunately, with the sort of lot in life that we've been given, is that it's just the lesser of two evils in every scenario. And I hope this thing with X lasts, because unfortunately, with a lot of these social media platforms, the moment the monopoly is developed, then comes in the censorship, the
That's what's happening to
adpocalypse.
Odyssey. They're selling Odyssey, and it's because of the SEC and all this stuff. And so we don't know what'll happen to Odyssey. Is it going to be bought by some woke asshole, or will be maybe Elon can buy it or whatever? But that was a viable alternative media platform. It takes super chats. It lets you say just about whatever you want, and but they've been driven under. And so,
Listen,
yeah, it's like,
here in
and Rumble
Pakistan,
kind of needs Odyssey to behave. Rumble doesn't censor because then everyone will leave and go to Odyssey. Well, if they get rid of Odyssey, you see, you got to have market competition and keep people honest.
the kind of capital that would require that would that would need to be generated to develop and sustain a platform like X or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, we don't have that in Pakistan. So we're always going to depend on cues coming out of the Americans or Silicon Valley market, right? X for us has been, it has allowed a lot more access to a lot of more people in places like Pakistan. I think what the future
There's
should be.
Telegram from Russia and VK from Russia,
Yeah, I mean,
and there's something called Line Line from South Korea, and so there are some others out there, but they're like
by the
localized
end of the
usually.
day, mainstream alternatives are going to have to come out of America, and I think the future of this stuff is going to have to be some sort
Yeah,
of crowdfunding situation, where apps completely work on crowdfunding, so that the marketplace of ideas can remain open, and they need to operate. These things genuinely need to operate like an open, very
I think that's
transparent
something Andrew Tate was working
free
on.
market.
And he just retweeted a thing I did on Palestine about the Hamas charter, dude. Um, Someone like the Tate brothers, they're a not quite billionaires, it's been the hundreds of millions, and if they started it because their followers are so, that yeah, I think one reason they didn't is because Elon fixed X. But if it needs to happen, like if you need an alternative to PayPal, for example. The thing is, I think Elon wants to have the everything app.
He
And
wants
so a lot of
WeChat.
people are like, why would I develop this? Elon's
He,
just gonna,
he wants WeChat.
go away. So
He
yeah, he
wants to
wants
make
WeChat. Well,
WeChat.
I
Yeah.
got banned off that too. So I can't have WeChat, WhatsApp, app, whatever, Instagram, Facebook, PayPal, Patreon,
Holy
YouTube, and
shit,
ban on
man!
all that
That's
stuff.
insane. That is
Union
insane.
Pay.
Did you get any?
Yeah.
Did you get anything with
hmm
your banking or no? Just payment gates.
Well, I live in Asia, so I moved all my stuff to banks over here because I knew better.
Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
you're safe in East Asia. I mean, it's Western enough where I'm sure you get your creature comforts, but at the same time, you don't maybe have to face that sort of pressure that you would get in America or
I
in
mean, I
Western
don't
Europe.
think East Asia is not, it's its own thing.
Without a
It's
doubt.
not really West or East. I mean, physically it's in the East, I guess, but it's Asia, man. Like everything's different.
I've been to Malaysia. That's the farthest east I've been.
Mm.
And you're right. Even though we're co-religionists, it's a very different culture and a very different cuisine and lifestyle, and their approach to their work and to their craft is much different than that you would find in. I mean,
It gets even more different when you get to like Japan,
right? I'm sure.
Korea,
I'm sure.
China.
I've seen it on TV. I mean, it
Diff,
seems very
don't
attractive. I mean, it's very tragic what's happening to the Korean and Japanese people with their population stuff, and that too they've inherited from the Americans and from the Westerners. But their population stuff is genuinely tragic. I hope they can resolve that soon.
Well, part of it is because they live so long. Like Japan has more centurions than any country on earth. There's people over 100.
Hmm.
So what they'll do is they'll say the population ratio of old to young, but that's because they have great grandparents, which is rare everywhere else. So they're it's not that they aren't having enough kids, isn't just that. And some of that's a lie. Like China had a one child policy. So on paper, we only had this many kids, but that's bull because they just went somewhere else, had a kid and brought them back, to get around the rule. So it's not, the numbers aren't reflective, but Yeah, Japan, they're just barely replacing themselves. Korea, I think, is the second lowest birth rate after Japan. But they don't they don't think you need indefinite growth. That's the ideology of a cancer cell. Like, why? There's a
Hmm.
finite amount of land. You can't just keep multiplying, or one generation will never be able to own a house.
It's
There's
a
too many
different way of
people who
looking at
compete
it. I
with.
mean, I mean, in terms of the way I view the world, the paradigm that I'm working with is would be infinite sort of growth, and I agree with you there that maybe that's just not how they view
I
life.
mean, if you're on an island like Japan and it's 75% mountains, you can only have but so many people.
Perhaps
I
that
mean, if you want
is,
to do a
yeah,
thought experiment, would you like to have a trillion people? No, like there's got to be an upper limit. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I
Like
understand.
if
Yeah,
you're going to have a certain standard of life and quality of living where you get a whole living room and a whole whatever, like everybody has a house at least that size and a yard and da 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 da. You cannot just have an indefinite number of people. If you want your grandkids and stuff to have the quality of life that you did, they cannot be competing with four generations of people and theirs being the largest one yet. You see, it's like it's very hard. People used to be able to move out at 18, get a two-bedroom house, but you can forget about that. People are in their mid 20s or even 30 before they can afford such a thing. And that will only get worse as we continue to multiply. It's not just how much lands exists, it's fewer, only a very small segment of the people own all the land. And so you're just going to be renting it from them. Like it's already been bought before you were born. And so you don't really have a choice in the matter. And it's I think we shouldn't just pick A or B, like, oh, we all have six kids or only one. Depends where you live and the cost of living and housing and lots of factors on whether or not it's a good idea to keep spitting out babies or to slow it down. And people are they're still having babies, they're just having them when they're older. So it slows it down.
right. I mean, maybe there's a lot. There's a more nuance to the way than it's actually presented to us online or on TV. Um, Going
It's a
back
lot
to
of it's from birth control. Like basically everybody besides the United States and the global south has declining birth rates. And that's because of the pill. And then places where you have so like a religious reason or just too impoverished or whatever, and they don't have the pill, then they still have a high birth rate. But where it's available and there's no taboo against it, um, when people have to get to decide exactly when they have a kid, they have fewer kids than when they go, oops, we're pregnant. Like every family, there's at least one kid that was, well, surprise, you know. So a
right,
lot of it's birth control.
I wanna bring the conversation back to this really fascinating aspect of alternative media and Twitter. Let's say, let's keep that as the sort of the case study
Mm.
here. You said that a lot of Zionist shills and you see all these like crazies online trying to defend Israel and its actions, and they get ratioed. And then that ratioing and then that constant bombardment of imagery from Gaza has translated into massive protests. And then we're hoping that those massive protests eventually um, can be leveraged against the politicians and then the decision makers for them to put a stamp to it and maybe, I mean, eventually the logical end would be to sanction Israel into, into ceasing all these activities. But at least in the first case, they would demand a ceasefire. We haven't seen that though. Look at Trudeau, look at Biden, look at all these statements. They can't even say the word ceasefire. Some sort of insane notion about a
They want to call it a
humanitarian
pause
pause. I've never heard this flipping thing in my
because
life.
ceasefire, they already said no. So we're like, we'll call it a pause because pause sounds like you can unpause it. You know, oh, we'll just temporarily and then we'll get back to it. They're going to call it a pause, but it is going to happen. It's going to take a lot of pressure. Biden said the day, no, no chance. There's no way. You know, he sucks. But um, if you look at it from what happened, forget about the United States. Like Yemen entered the war. They started shooting missiles at Israel. Hezbollah has taken out over 22 tanks. They're not full in, but it's not like nothing. I mean, they fixed in place about 70,000 soldiers have to sit in the north just in case, just because of the threat of Hezbollah.
No,
Yeah, and you're
Nasrallah's
seeing
speech was
more and more.
Nasrallah's speech and the strategy that Hezbollah is employing is brilliant. It's like an attrition thing. They're not entering the war. They're letting the attention remain on Gaza and on the Hamas, but at the same time, they're engaging the Israelis to the point where, those troops are engaged and they're losing military vehicles.
They got to balance the line, because if they go too much, that brings America into the war, and then they all lose. If they let it be a one-on-one, Hamas will win. But they're just doing it enough to split the Israeli army and give Hamas more of a chance and some breathing room. But if they were to just fire hundreds of thousands of rockets, which they could, and just start taking out Israeli cities, 100% America would carpet bomb them. So they have to. Look, the U.S. protects Israel, but they're not going to bomb Gaza. They'll give Israel the bombs to do it. They'll sell them the planes to do it, but they're not going to pilot them, and they're not going to go in on the ground. And that is because of the protests and stuff. So it has had some effect, but not enough and not soon enough, unfortunately. But there are American, not the government, but like churches and charities and things that are in Egypt and bringing aid in, like, and bringing nurses and doctors and stuff, and Canadians and stuff too. So, they don't control all the businesses. Like, Americans just do it on their own. That's sort of the individual part of our culture. So, I'm going anyway.
No,
I don't have to have the government do it.
Even Victoria Nuland, the party that she stopped, their whole leadership has arrived already. They already went to Qatar, met Hamas leadership, and they've already arrived at the Rafah crossing with aid. So even here, the Americans, they hold influence, but right at the center. Everywhere else, people are independent enough to sort of, and the internet is not allowing anyone. You know what the big contentious debate has become here in Pakistan online? It's with BDS, because there's a class of people, shills, people working with American think tanks, the types, the neocon, neoliberal types. And then obviously there's a dumber class of people who just sort of get caught in the rhetoric, and there's an idea that boycotting does not work, and that McDonald's has become sort of the main bone of contention, because what McDonald's Israel did.
McDonald's is actually a real estate company. It's not a burger franchise, and so each McDonald's is up to the person that rents that McDonald's. It's not from the top. So boycotting McDonald's is kind of silly. You can boycott McDonald's
in Pakistan,
the McDonald's in Korea, Pakistan, the McDonald's in
Pakistan specifically. The McDonald's in Pakistan is owned by one corporation, and they pay royalties back to the center. So if you do the math, and then the center is taxed in America, and then that tax goes into military spending, and then a portion of that military spending does go into Israel. So McDonald's can
I'm sure McDonald's has offshore tax havens. But yeah.
I'm sure they do. But
probably
the debate is not
headquarters in Ireland somewhere.
In the Virgin Islands or Cyprus or one of those, Antigua and Barbuda,
Yeah. For real. I'm sure they do.
St. Kitts and Nevis, the British Virgin Islands. There's so many of these places, and they're selling passports and stuff all the time.
But they do. They get a lot of their potatoes and stuff from the U.S., and so somehow money is going.
No, russet potatoes, we grow them here as well now. The russet potatoes that are the requirement for their French fries, we make them here now as well. We grow them here.
So that hurts you too by boycotting McDonald's.
It does.
I think you're supposed to boycott Israel. Not everybody that's this many degrees of Kevin Bacon from Israel. The most important thing in BDS is the divestment. To get out of Caterpillar and any Israeli companies and things. Sanctions really aren't up to you, because only a state can do that. So you can support sanctions, but you don't have the power to sanction or not sanction. No. That's up to the states. So you can boycott. Probably you'd never buy anything from Israel anyway. But divestment's big. I don't know about in Pakistan, but in the U.S., there's a lot of churches that heavily invest, and universities, in these conglomerates involved with the occupation, and pulling the money out, which the Presbyterian Church did and the Methodist Church did, and it was like $7 billion. So that hurt. That's why they're scared of BDS. They don't like the divestment part.
All right.
I started a divestment movement before BDS existed, and I got all this crap from Hillel and these pro-Israel groups. And then I was looking at it, and I was looking at the list of companies and things involved, and I realized, all these same assholes are involved in Burma. So I'm going to have a divest Burma movement because it'll still be against Israel too, but I won't get any of the flack. And nobody's like, no, we want to occupy Burma. Oh, yeah, of course not. So that passed, and we got our university. We would draw money from those companies, and I was like, yes, because it was like a 90% overlap with all the stuff I wanted to get rid of with Israel anyway.
That's
And people are like, why did you just admit that? I'm like, because then it wouldn't have worked. Like, do you want to have your principles and lose, or do you want to actually get the change you want and then them not know why? I don't care if they know why. Plus, I don't want that to happen in Burma anyway. It wasn't totally that some strategy. I like against both things, but yeah, there was no pushback when Israel was removed from the equation. It's this weird thing where like, oh, I want to divest from these companies involved in the occupation of Palestine. Like, oh, anti-Semitism. But nobody's going to support the dictator in Burma, in Myanmar.
because
Cares.
they don't have a lobby group working in the U.S. Right?
Right. They're not brainwashed to think you're Hitler or something if you're against it.
You're an American, and you seem to have divorced yourself in the sense that you don't want to physically be in America anymore and deal with this sort of extremist Christian sort of behavior and this sort of Zionistic or this globalist and imperial tendencies. You're still online.
It's all that, and I have 3 kids now too, and I don't want them going to school where they might get shot. It's America's not safe. They have bars in the windows at schools and metal detectors in some of the schools, and I think the education system's become indoctrination. They've got like drag queen strippers going to elementary schools and stuff, and I don't want my kids to have to put up with that. But even if it was just me, I'd had to deal with a lot of religious bigotry, and there's just a constant hostility there on the news, and even in the comedy shows and whatever you're watching. All the information coming in is some conflict or hostility, and it's kind of like fish don't know they're in the water. You have such a baseline of antagonism from everybody, gossip and stuff. It's just so normal that you don't even know how different it is when you get out. When I first got to Japan, it was like all that disappeared. You turn on TV, they're just like cooking food or some neutral thing. They're so polite and so honorable and sincere. And wow, I don't have any of this. There's no racial tension because they're just all Japanese. They're not really religious at all. They don't get any bigotry. They don't care what you believe or don't. It's just not even discussed. And so you don't have to put up with any of that stuff. And I was like, oh, what a breath of fresh air to go down the street and there's not a single cigarette butt on the ground, no water bottles, no litter. People have respect for where they live. You don't hear arguments. People don't yell talk. Anywhere, any state in America, you see a group of like 5 people, and the volume's just. You go on a subway, you can hear the person on the other end of the subway. That's how loud they speak, or they're playing music, or. And you go to Japan, you get on a subway, people sleep. It's that quiet. There could be 100, there could be 0. You wouldn't know if you close your eyes because not one person's making a sound. Try that in New York at any time of day. Impossible.
You feel you're too propagandized constantly in America. It's just constant bombardment with consumption or political ideals or religious beliefs, and you feel that there's sort of a neutrality in an East Asian society it's
combative. It's like men against women, gay versus straight, black and white. It's always like, if there's nothing going on, they'll just start picking scabs, digging stuff up from the past, like slavery, this. I'm like, whoa, hey, this isn't us. They constantly have like the grievancy Olympics or something, and in East Asia, it's like they're just watching pop stars and anime, and it's just so peaceful. Like you see somebody with a Hello Kitty keyring on his book bag, and he's just reading and normal things, like there's no
How have these Asian people?
conflict.
I mean, I know Japan and Korea are sort of part of the NATO and American ambit. How do they sort of view the Palestine-Israel
Well, they're not
conflict?
part of NATO, but they
They're
are.
not, but they're in the they're in
They
the
are in the U.S.
yeah.
sphere of influence. Like they're both huge trading partners, especially Japan. Like Japan just sent $65 million to Gaza. Korea sent 2 million.
As aid.
Um, yeah. Well, they sent the money and then they sent material aid in addition to that of like medical supplies and
Oh,
things.
wow.
Will it get there? I don't know. But and
Probably
this was not to Palestine; it was to Gaza. This wasn't to the West Bank. They gave 110 million to Gaza and West Bank after Cast led to help them rebuild, and they gave 100 million. Shinzo Abe did to Syria for reconstruction in Deir ez-Zor and I think Palmyra.
I
They use
mean,
that, and
since
Japan
you've
went over there and helped build the buildings even.
it's
So, but when Japan does stuff like that, they just quietly do it. It's not, oh, look what we gave. Oh, give it. They just do it. And you wouldn't know unless you looked it up. Like you say, name a famous Japanese person, name a famous Japanese company. Very easy, right? Sony, Panasonic, because
Toyota.
collectively they're like, we are the thing, but it's not about the individual, the hero, or the guy like I made the da da da. It's like we made this great thing. So you know the brand names, you don't know the individuals because that's not how they are.
Unfortunately, you did mention an individual who has passed away, and it was very tragic what happened.
Yeah, he was the prime minister for 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that Shinzo Abe was sort of assassinated for his anti-war stance, or what was it?
No, it was I actually met the killer before he killed him. Obviously, I didn't know, but he lived in Nara City.
Are you
I lived in
messing with me
Nara.
right now?
I was the goodwill ambassador for his state. I'm the U.S. goodwill ambassador for Nara Prefecture. And Shinzo Abe was killed in Yamato Saidaiji, which is just, there's nobody ever had been killed in that town until the big one. And what happened was Tetsuya was, his family was like one of the richest families in Nara City, where it's called Nara State, Nara City, like New York, New York. And his father died. He had a construction firm. His mother got wrapped up in this cult from Korea, and she was just giving them all the money and ran the business under the ground. And they blamed Shinzo Abe because Shinzo Abe allowed this group to come to Japan. But it wasn't Shinzo Abe. Shinzo Abe's grandfather allowed this group to come to Japan and practice. But what it was a hardcore anti-communist group in Korea. But Shinzo Abe was with a group that were like, you could call them Japanese nationalists. They very loved the emperor and all this. They're very right wing. The Korean group wanted to unify the two Koreas and had completely separate goals. But the only thing they had in common is they both hate communists, and North Korea is a threat to both. So they, as a negotiation, all right, I'll let you into Japan. You let us do this and that. That's all it was. But he needed to blame somebody because they had lost all their personal fortune. And it's such a shame. And shame's worse than death in Japan. They went from like the richest family to the poorest, where he's having to, beg for food and borrow money and stuff. And he's trying to help the business. And then his mom would take the profits and give them away again over and over. Whatever he made, she'd steal it and give it to this cult. And so he wanted to go to Korea and kill one of the heads of the cult. He couldn't manage it. And he just thought, well, Abe's grandfather let him in here. I'm going to get him. He almost killed him in Osaka, and he got cold feet. And he had a homemade gun.
The one that
I know
he
where he
used.
made the gun. He went to the next to Daiki in Minami Ikoma and got the pipes and stuff he used. He practiced in his yard. So I talked to his uncle. I went to the stores he went to. I went to Yamato Saidaiji too. And They had 6 blocks of people giving flowers for like weeks, even in the hot sun, the rain, just there on a table for Shinzo Abe. But it had nothing to do with his politics. It was just he got blamed for something his grandfather's also prime minister, had done, from this poor guy that he joined the Japanese Defense Force. He had all these shitty jobs, and just he felt like, you ruined our life. We went from top to bottom. Really, he should have blamed his mother. But he shot Abe, and then he just like let himself get tackled, like he was done, like after he'd done that. And then right after that, a guy in Wakayama, which is also the Kansai region, threw a smoke grenade at Kishida, the next prime minister. And if you read the news, they say he threw an explosive, like tried to kill the prime minister. That's not what happened. I saw the video and everything. It's just a little smoke. It's just like a firecracker that only makes smoke. He just threw it on the ground because he wanted to get arrested. It was just somebody that was sick of his life, and maybe jail was better for him or whatever. He wasn't really trying to hurt anybody. But it's given that area a reputation like, ooh, Abe got shot in Nara. Kishida almost got blown up by a bomb, although he didn't at all. Better stay out of that range, That's, there are Japanese guys can get really introverted and just completely lose it. And what was happening is, in poverty, is he had helped take care of his sister, and he had just felt all this family shame, and he had no one. He was so alone. And he just gets twisted. He's online, and these leftist blogs were like blaming them for this Korean call, this fantasy QAnon type of crap, like the equivalent of that. And he got sucked in, and then he killed Abe when he was giving a speech in Saidaiji. He shot him twice. And Abe actually held himself, and he stepped down off the box, like, and then knelt, and just looking at him like, why? And then he collapsed. He didn't make it. He died right there. But he was I mean, I had issues with Abe. Some things he did was good, some things were bad, but he'd really been the first prime minister since Koizumi, at least, that was getting world recognition and fixing a lot of problems in Japan the hard way, the thing that people didn't want to do, like long-term strategies and stuff, Abenomics and whatnot. And he was the first. Like, Japan goes through prime ministers really fast, like Italy. It's like a year or 2 years maybe, and you're out. And so he had been prime minister and been replaced, and then on his second time, he held it for 8 years, and 1 year before, so 9 together. And that's the longest anybody been prime minister since like the 70s. And so he was like a recognizable face. You had like Macron, you had Putin, and then you had like Abe. Like, he'd been there long enough to know and make all these relationships and stuff. And Kishida is bad because his foreign finance ministers, they're not raising interest rates in Japan, and the yen is just plummeting. It's free fall, and that needs to be fixed. But I don't live there anymore. It's not my problem, but I do wish them the best, and I wish they'd raise interest rates. But it looks like until April, there will not be a change of the head of what's equivalent to their Federal Reserve for their central bank. So they're going to keep interest rates at zero. It's actually at 0.1. It's bad. And the yen is collapsing. And they did finally reopen trade with Russian oil. And that hurt them too. It was a series of things they did wrong. And nobody likes them. Korea doesn't like their president either. They're like, why did you give money to Ukraine? Because South Korea sent 500,000 rounds to Poland, not to Ukraine, but it was to Ukraine. And in response, Russia bought 1,000,000 rounds from North Korea, which is, they needed the money way more than Russia needed the ammo. But it was just like, oh, we can play this game. But the reason they pressured South Korea to sell that was because NATO had basically run out of 155 millimeter artillery ammo. And they're looking around, and it was like South Korea or Egypt were the only two that had a lot. and Pakistan was third. Actually, they ended up getting it from South Korea, and because they've been stockpiling this just in case of the big war with the North, and they're like, oh, we'll get it. It was a dumb decision because now you're allowing North Korea to break its economic stronghold by strengthening relations with Russia. So they're mad about that, but all these problems with the economies and stuff, they're important, but it just seems so petty compared to what's happening in Gaza. Like, I can't get my mind off the fact that there's an Air Force just attacking apartment buildings. Did you see what they did today with that RX-9? It's a silent bomb that shoots out blades. It's cutting people's legs off.
What?
Oh man, don't watch it. It's
the parking lot thing.
It's an American bomb. It's a Hellfire, but it's a RX-9. It's like instead of an incendiary, it just shoots out blades and it just and cuts everybody into ribbons. Yeah.
Is this the one they threw in the parking lot?
It hit a parking lot next to like near a hospital.
Yeah. I think I saw this guy who had lost his leg, unfortunately. I think I saw it last night. Pakistan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when I said today, it was, I'm 4 hours or whatever. But yeah, that's so, why do we make things like that? And how would you ever use that that's for like hit a trench or something. You don't drop that in a parking lot full of innocent people, but they did. And they caught it on film.
Because
everybody's like this all the time because they never know,
There was journalists there.
Kids are writing their names on their arms in case they get suffocated, that you can identify them by seeing the name on their forearm or on their leg.
Yeah.
And they say 10,000 are dead. It's higher because there's all these people who are missing, which is really high chance they're dead. They're somewhere in the rubble. I can't believe this is happening right in front of the world, and they can't do anything. That's why I'm disgusted with the U.S. because the U.S. could end this in seconds by going to Israel and saying, not another dime, and that would be it. They subsidize that whole economy, billions a year.
Not one presidential candidate though, Ryan. Not one. Not a one. No. Like, why? There's not a single one that can be financed independently. Like a Jill Stein or somebody. I don't know.
Maybe Dr. Shiva might run. There's no like, they all suck. I might run for Congress, and when my kids get a little older, I'll move back, see if I can get in 3rd District in North Carolina. I want to be the next Ron Paul.
That would be a sight to see, my friend.
I think I could do it. I know the issues in and out, beach erosion and all the rest of it. Like, I've lobbied before. I do want to help my state, and I think I'd do a good job. But especially when it comes to this foreign policy stuff, like, I'll be another Thomas Massey minimal.
How would you secure finance for something like that? How would you, what would be the way that you would you leverage your Twitter popularity?
I got 100,000, 105,000 on Twitter now. So I imagine by the time, years from now, I gotta easily have 500,000 or more, and I'll be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
If I had not been banned the last 20 years, I'd have that anyway. This is what they do to people to make it impossible. We'll see. But that's the thing. I'm like, why doesn't anyone good run? And then I thought, why don't I run? I'm asking you, someone should do something. I'm like, why don't I do it?
I mean, I
don't even live there, but I'm like,
you've done as much so far.
I could go do it. Yeah.
You've done so much so far. I mean, with all the bannings, and you keep at it, keep making these films, keep tweeting out, keep coming on shows, you keep coming on radio shows and podcasts and spreading the message. You're clearly somebody who wants to do something about it, right?
Yeah, and I feel like go to the belly of the beast. I don't want to live in DC. I don't want my kids living in DC for sure, but like, if they're fine, then I will go deal with it.
Number one, I would like to follow up this conversation with a more detailed one about the nuclear armament and the program by which Israel has acquired all these weapons. Also, thank you for coming. Thank you for the work that you're doing in exposing Israel and the sort of imperial agenda that they have in the Middle East. Thank you for talking against your own people, the Americans, and the foreign policy that they're pursuing. It takes a lot of guts to contradict
Well,
or
my
to.
people are Southerners, not the Yankees. So, no.
I mean, maybe the South will rise again. Maybe if they have you in North Carolina, and we'll be excited to see,
The South
inshallah.
did oppose the COVID stuff quite a bit, but when it comes to Israel, every state rolls over. Unfortunately, it's terrible.
It's the Christian Zionism I don't get, because it's the most anti-Semitic position that you can have, because they literally believe that Jesus is going to come back and slaughter the Jews, which is insane. And at the same time, they're willing to finance the Jews to establish the state of Israel so that Jesus can come back quicker. The fact that the Israeli people are willing to accept that
Nah,
money.
that is like the super holy rollers. Most of the Christian Zionists don't even read their own books.
Right.
That's why they are the way they are. They just think they've heard of Jews because they're in the Bible, and the other people, they don't know Palestinians, so they're like, well, that's their land because I'm familiar with them. It's that simple. That's all it is.
Tragic as that
Yeah.
might be, but that
Isn't that awful? That's kind of worse. But
that's actually the first kind of Christian Zionist I could at least it's a good supervillain in my head, but the second kind just sounds retarded. That you have no idea, because they're in the Bible, the Israelites, they should be in Israel. I mean, why is it called Israel if it's not theirs,
that's
right?
Jewish land. It's in my book. Like, because Islam comes after Christianity.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, it couldn't be them. I'm like, but people aren't a religion. People are people, and then they believe in a religion.
Yeah.
And Palestinians are Canaanites, if you want to get technical about it, that they are the original people, or they're, the original people don't exist because everyone's an admixture.
Nobody's
but,
anything anymore. Let's be honest.
Yeah, they are more related to the original than as much as you could be of anyone around.
Genetically possible. I mean, and honestly, I don't even think that that's a moral metric to measure anything. I mean, to be genetically.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. I mean, we all share the dirt. We all share the dirt, and we're all going to go back.
Yeah, I'm not Korean. Look where I live. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. As long as you respect the people and their culture and their traditions, and you can assimilate. And
they look at me as one of the good ones. No, I'm just kidding.
No, thank you, Brother Ryan.
They're just like, as long as you're not Chinese. No.
Yeah, Korean Chinese hate is. I mean, with the Japanese also.
They only get along when a Japanese person enters the room. Then they're best friends.
Right.
Well, if once that Japanese guy leaves, they'll start fighting with each other. No one gets along with China. They're the worst tourists. You ask anybody around China, the worst tourists, even worse than Americans, are the Chinese.
Just to end this on a more serious note, what should we follow? What should we let the audience know? How can they follow you? And what are the news sources that you're using primarily, and they can follow those directly as well for on-ground coverage?
Oh, yeah, what a good question. Well, I have a website, ancreport.com. So ANC is anti-neocon. And on there is my Twitter, my Substack, Rumble, and I have Buy Me a Coffee now. But yeah, I mean, I use a lot of Telegram for like on the ground reports. I like antiwar.com. I follow people like Scott Horton and Jim Loeb and certain authors and things. The Gray Zone is good sometimes. I like to compare and contrast. So go read this or read that. Another pretty good news aggregate is whatreallyhappened.com. You gotta, nothing is foolproof. You always have to check and verify, but yeah, these kind of things. Consortium News is another good source. But I also read a lot of books. I know that's harder, but since this is my job, I get to do that. I have time to do that. Everyone, I know you can't be doing, you just need to get the news tonight or whatever. But yeah, and then there's podcasters and stuff that are good too on Ukraine. Doug McGregor, Scott Ritter, Larry C. Johnson, Andrei Martinyanov.
Huge fans of Scott Ritter, by the way. Huge fans, Scott Ritter.
What's that?
everyone here.
Ritter. Yeah, he was on the show a couple days ago.
Dude, I've
He's
been
great.
trying to
He's good on
contact
Gaza too.
him for like a month now. It's impossible. It's impossible. But
Well, I might be able to fix that too.
yeah, thank you. Hopefully, we can have him on because I mean, as a military veteran and someone who's anti-war and he believes in nuclear disarmament.
I tell you, Larry C. Johnson's another one that's just as good as Scott. Like you should get him too.
When we stop recording, I'll ask you some more questions. So with that, hopefully,
In fact, Scott was sharing Larry's stuff on Telegram this morning. He's good. Ray McGovern's another stud. Never had him on. Had everyone else. Ray McGovern's great to follow on Ukraine, Russia, on all the foreign policy stuff. He's great. So there's certain people, certain authors, certain interviewers, and then websites. Again, antiwar.com is just a great because it's a news aggregate. Jason Dietz over there. Yeah, there's some podcasters I like too. Pete Kiona's and a lot of things. Libertarian Institute's great. But I don't really have like a place. I just check a bunch of places, and then I get news feed from my Telegram and other people. So,
thank you, Brother Ryan. I think we'll end the show with that, and then we can continue this conversation.
Free Palestine.